This is the Truth Network.
We are your church. We are the home on earth. Build your kingdom here. Let the darkness clear. Show your mighty hand. Heal our streets and land. Set your church on fire. Win this nation back. Change the atmosphere. Build your kingdom here. We pray.
Welcome to the Christian Car Guy Radio Show.
I say this calls for action, and now.
Like a lion we roar. We're in it together. Join hand in hand. United we stand. It's moments like this, with our backs to the wall, that we're strongest of all. Strongest of all. Strongest of all.
Think and Grow Rich for 2025, the seamless garment. And there's more, and there's more. The wisdom that built the automobile business can build the church in 2025. I guess you're probably wondering what all that means, and I hope to make that clear. I really do, but you can't help but just love those two songs. I really do. The Wren Collective did that, Build Your Kingdom Here, and we certainly want to do that in 2025. And then Yaakov Shwinky, that's actually an Israeli song about their battle currently in, it's pretty cool but the idea is united we stand. And when you think about that whole idea of united we stand, there's a phenomenal amount of wisdom in that. And, I guess I've been unpacking that idea most of my adult life. And I think all of us have. It's like, what is wisdom, Bob? And so speaking of United We Stand, we actually have the dream team here on the Christian Car Guy Show today. I have both Bob and Jerry in the same time with me, because often it's Bob and Jerry, but no Robbie, or it might be Bob and no Jerry. And, here we go.
We are together, and this is awesome.
It always works out well.
And if you were in the studio with us, the power I feel in this room, because I know the power of these two gentlemen is God in them, but what God does through them, he has done for the Christian Car Guy Show over the years. It just blows my mind. So, in the book Think and Grow Rich by Andrew Carnegie, he wrote of several industrialists. And that idea of thinking and grow rich, although it was titled that, I guess is sort of a come on for people to think about that they could make money. But the real idea of the book was to grow spiritually and really get the wisdom that Solomon was talking about that cries in the streets, right? And everybody wants that. Like, what was it that allowed Andrew Carnegie to build what he built? What was the wisdom that allowed Henry Ford, to put essentially Detroit to work? There were thousands and millions of people that were put to work in Andrew Carnegie steel mills, and there were millions of people that were put to work in Henry Ford's, assembly line that allowed them to build cars that, eventually obviously changed America, made us the great country that actually could take on Hitler in World War II and Japan and all the stuff that happened because we had some wisdom that we were built on. So what is that wisdom? Well, I was doing a lot of studying this week. Bob just looks at me like, here we go.
You always bring it full circle for me. I have no doubt that you'll do that again.
So what I was studying, and I've got to go down this trail to kind of just give you an idea. What I was studying did not have to do with wisdom originally. It just had to do with Jesus grew. At the end of the Christmas story in Luke chapter 2, it essentially says that Jesus grew in wisdom and in stature and favor with God and man. That's a really cool thing. And I want that in 2025, don't you? I want to grow in wisdom. I want to grow in stature. I want to grow in favor with God and man, of course.
I certainly hope so. And go ahead. I'm not going to. I was
no,
fixing to go down
no.
a different trail there, but it's
yeah.
just. I think too many times we, as Christians, kind of lose sight of that. Is that our growing it's every day we're growing, and sometimes we can think, you know what, I've achieved. I'm where I need to be. But God says, nah, if we look back at Paul's messages, you know what? It's a journey. It's a race, and it's till the end. And we're called to...
Right. And a lot of time we're in the wilderness and we get really thirsty.
Well, I've had it said to me, if you're not growing, you're dying.
Right.
And it's... Sometimes I wonder, is my growth spurt over?
No.
Is there another growth
Oh, it's
spurt
going on
in
for
my
eternity.
Can we
future?
answer that for you, Bob?
Well, I'm not talking
No.
about my belt line. The Christmas eating has made me grow there. But, you know, we have periods I have periods in my life where I'm really close. And then I have times where I'm not nearly as close. And, you know, something happens. And I hate to say it, but some of the closest times was after trauma and stuff. And I'm not wishing for trauma, but I see the past impacts it's had in my life.
Right. Well, you know, I thought about it this week that, you know, if you follow history of Israel, you know, they would get close to God and then they would think, I've got it from here. And they'd find themselves under the Philistines, or they'd find themselves on the Moabites, whoever. Somebody'd come in and invade them until they figured out, they'd turn back to God. And then they'd be good for a little bit, and then they'd go off again and take care of them. And it's a cycle like that. But it takes that sometimes to tell us, oh, yeah, I can't. God rigged the world. He rigged it so that we cannot do it without him. And, you know, we can go the easy way or we can go the hard way, but either way, you know, you can develop a 2025 where you have a plan to have a daily intake of water, or he will make you thirsty. So that you know you got to have it. And that water is Jesus. Jesus is the Word, and the Word is living water in so many different ways. And the more you drink of it, the closer you get to Jesus, the more you fall in love with Jesus, you know, the more fruit that you can have. This is some of the fruit I want to talk about is wisdom, okay? Wisdom, the very first mention of it in the Bible has to do with the priestly garment. It's in Exodus 28, and it talks about that these women, or the artisans that are going to make these garments, it requires great wisdom. Why would it take great wisdom? Well, just think about it. How are you going to, and Bob just asked me right before the show, well, how do you make a seamless garment? In other words, a priestly garment like the one Jesus wore right before he went up on the cross that they took off of him was seamless. Well, how does that exactly work? It takes wisdom, right? And I know how it works. I can see the circular, you know, type of thing that they built in order to create a garment that's seamless. But now the sleeves become a particular issue, and they make it difficult beyond my wisdom. So it's going to take some wisdom in order to make this seamless garment, okay? But again, as I told you earlier, we're going to make reference to Henry Ford, and we're going to make reference to Andrew Carnegie, that they had great wisdom that put this country to work. And the idea of seamless is critical to the idea. It's wisdom. That if you are a visionary like Henry Ford or Andrew Carnegie, if you can take that vision and you can get everybody on the same page, then you and make it seamless, and everybody's going in the same direction, you can put millions of people to work like Andrew Carnegie did, like Henry Ford did. Right? Henry Ford built the assembly line so that it would be so simple that, okay, oh, I get it. I'm supposed to put this nut on. Every single time this wheel comes up, I'm going to put that lug nut on, and I got it. I can put 5 lug nuts on, and I'm good to go, and the car goes down the road, right? He made it seamless. He made it easy for them to do. Same thing with Andrew Carnegie with steel, right? He had groups of people that made the pourings. He had groups of people that you know, added the coke, that did all the things, you know, and he organized it in such a way that everybody knew what the main thing was, and once they got all on the same page, then they could really churn out a bunch of steel. Well, that steel, as we talked about, was great wisdom.
I was watching a movie one time, and they would get a sample of the steel and take it to the lab or something, but there was a guy there that would tell them what it was from his previous knowledge before they even took it to the lab. But they took it to the lab anyway. But he was right. He just knew from the experience.
So what I want to do is relate this to your own experience. As we move into 2025, if we could all be seamless builders, right? Who do you know in your life? Who do you remember that built a team, whether it was at work, a coach, somebody that made it where everybody got together and everybody contributed? What did that look like in your life? 866-348-7884.
You're listening to the Truth Network and truthnetwork.com.
Like a lion we roar, we're in it together, join hand in hand. United we stand. It's moments like this.
Think and grow rich in 2025. That's the seamless garment. The wisdom that built the automobile business could help build the church, right, in 2025. And so the question is that I posed right before the break is, who have you known in your life that had that capability of unity, right? And it's fascinating to me on the idea of unity that in Mark chapter 12, verse 28, Jesus answering the Pharisee who had asked him, what's the first commandment? He said, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord thy God is one Lord." That's unity, right? And love the Lord thy God with all their heart, and with all their soul, and all their strength. In other words, that's all one. That's the Shema. It's from Deuteronomy, and it is a combined idea of unity of love for God. And if you have a unity of love for God, guess what? You're going to love people because God's in those people. And during the break, Jerry had talked about this idea of those great leaders had faith. And I want you to talk about that in a minute. But before you talk about that, I want to remind people that, this is a live show. And one of the greatest aspects of it from Robbie Dilmore's point of view is you listening that call in and share. It's just like during the break, Jerry shared this and my eyes just opened like ka-ching. That's exactly right. Well, you probably have something of somebody that you observed when you were a kid that had that ability. We want you to call 866-348-7884. Maybe it was a boss. Maybe it was a coach. 866-348-7884. Jerry?
Yeah, before I explain that, I just want to, when you said that, somebody who could think of, I had a couple coaches through the years, and I think about, how they were able to convey what they were wanting and bringing people together, and how much better as a team you are when everybody works as one. But also it made me think about Danny Spainhour, our missions minister at Pinedale.
He is. He's one of those.
He is one of those. And when we go on a mission trip, we will bring people who, some of them are there because of, I really don't know why to start with, but he's able to get everybody to form and be one unit and have one purpose and stuff. And then what happens on those trips is just utterly amazing. And then sometimes the most amazing part isn't with the people or the place we were at. It's the change I see in the people that went because they bought into what Danny was selling. That's pretty powerful.
But to get back to the other thing you were talking about, which is that attribute that Henry Ford had, Moses had, David had it. Certainly, David had it.
You look all the way down, Ford, Carnegie, Roosevelt. You name them, they all have it. You look at the pillars in the Bible and stuff, they had it also. And that's faith. They had to be sold out for what they thought their mission was. And hopefully it's one that not only being sold out, but also you had to convey that and have the wisdom to know that, to transfer that to the people that needed to carry it out, because they didn't necessarily carry it out. They brought it forward, and then they trusted it into other people to believe what they were saying and to buy into it. And also by having faith, you had to also be able to withstand the ridicule, because whenever, I don't care if you're learning how to reprocess steel, beat out a fender and put paint on, take parts off in a salvage yard, or the way you do a broadcast, if you don't have faith in it, it's not going to succeed. But also, if you can't withstand the criticism to know you're doing the right thing, it's not going to succeed. So,
Might run into a naysayer or two along the way.
yeah,
Well, obviously.
there's one on every corner almost, if you really look.
Yeah.
You know, I think about blind Bartimaeus, one of my favorite stories in the Bible, right? Like, he's like, Jesus, son of David, have mercy on me. And they're all like, shut up, you blind beggar, shut up. And he goes, no, you shut up. Jesus, son of David. It didn't matter how many times they told him to shut up. You know, and he was the one that stopped. Jesus stopped, not to talk to the people that were saying, shut up, by the way. They stopped to talk to Bartimaeus, because what Bartimaeus had faith, right? He had faith that Jesus would help him. He had faith in the whole deal, and that's what it's exactly what it takes. But the other thing that I've noticed about great leaders is they had faith in me. The ones that I've had in my life, right? I think about a basketball coach I had in 8th grade. He went undefeated for like 7 years in a row because he not only had faith in his systems and what he was teaching, but he had faith in every player. He would figure out what their gifting was. Like my case, he could see, Robbie cannot dribble. Robbie, don't dribble. Just don't dribble. But man, you can rebound. Go here. This is how you make the outlet pass. And he taught me all the things to do with the skills that I had. And then he would build on that because he recognized what greatness was in everybody, because everybody has it, and then he had faith in that. Okay, this is how we're gonna make you all that you can be, right? But it's like putting a round peg in a round hole. If you see that person can't dribble, you tell them, don't dribble. Robbie, you're 6'5" tall. You put the ball, every time you put it on the ground, the ball's bouncing 15 feet in the air. Anybody can steal it. That kind of thing. So when you think about that in your life, seriously, I want you to call, because I want to hear your wisdom, right? Or maybe you have a favorite wisdom verse that speaks to this in your mind. 866-348-7884. We're looking for you to bring out the best in us, right? That idea of 2025, we move forward with wisdom. And how does that apply to the church, right? To have faith in those other members, to get on the same page, to bring out the best. And obviously, nobody was better than Jesus, right? Yeah. And when you think about the concepts that we're talking about, getting everybody on the same page, all 12 of them, right? And they were like me, kind of clunky.
Yeah, can you imagine that?
They couldn't dribble.
Yeah, when you're sitting there, you're being told, follow me, follow my commands. I've showed you the path, but you're going to be persecuted. The world's going to turn on you. You're going to face persecution you can't even imagine. And they all said, okay, I'm game.
Bring it.
I'm in. And I'm sure everybody out there listening has a story of somebody that has been that in their life, or they've been that in somebody else's life. And as you said, Robbie, those stories are what encourage other people. So, man, if you're sitting on that great story, don't sit on it.
Share it, because somebody may need that to help their employee or be helped, however that works. 866-348-7884. We're talking wisdom today, and wisdom for the church in 2025. We'll be right back, but we need your call. Call us.
You're listening to the Truth Network and truthnetwork.com.
We are your church. We are the home on earth. Build your kingdom here. Let the darkness fear. Show your mighty hand. Heal our streets and land. Set your
Think and grow rich for 2025. The seamless garment, or the wisdom that built the automobile business that can build the church in 2025. All that to say that, man, unity, when we come together, it's just the opposite of what happened at Babylon, right? They came together, got themselves in trouble. So God confused our language. Well, by unconfusing our language and by getting on the same page, we can do almost anything, especially when it comes to things of God, right? If God's on our side, here we go. And so there's been people like that in your life that had that ability to cast a vision, to get people on the same page, like a Henry Ford, or like that was that coach, that, or maybe it was a parent, or maybe it was a Boy Scout leader, right? It could have been a boss. And I've seen some great bosses over the years. I've seen some that weren't so great. But interestingly, I don't know if you ever heard this about Bear Bryant. I always loved it. They said that part of the reason that he was such a great coach, or he may have said it, he said, I could take your team and make them beat my team, or I could take my team and make them beat your team. In other words, it was a matter of bringing out the best in all the players, getting them on the same page. It wasn't that those individuals had some miraculous amount of talent more than the other ones. It's just figuring out which one can do what, and then making sure you bring out the best and encourage them and don't discourage them, right? And faith, as Jerry talked about, is a gigantic aspect of it all.
I had a guy I worked for at R.J. Reynolds in the print shop, and I worked second shift, and there was a first shift, and there was a little competitive nature in the people and everything. But that man was so smart. He would come to me on the tough jobs. He said, them boys on first don't think you can handle this one. And he just knew how to push that button and get everything Bob had at his, he could draw the best out of me. And he knew how to push my little button and get that very best job I could provide. And that was one of the smartest men I ever worked for.
Yeah, and so how about you? I know you got that thing rolling around in your brain. You could encourage all of us. 866-348-7884, 866-34-TRUTH. The thing that made the light come on for me when I finally began to understand the concept I'm trying to explain today was Charles Schwab was one of Andrew Carnegie's main guys. You think he's somebody that was a financial guy. He wasn't. He was a steel man. And he was in charge of all the steel mills. And one day he came into the lowest producing steel mill in all of Andrew Carnegie's massive amount of steel mills. And when he got in there, the first thing he did was he walked up to the foreman. He went in there about 3 a.m. And when the second or third shift was coming off and the next shift was coming on, and he said, how many pourings of steel did you guys make last night? And the guy said 6. And he took a piece of chalk, and you can imagine this big shop floor. It's concrete, right? And he writes a big 6 on the middle of the floor and just walks out of the plant. To your point, Bob, right? So you can imagine, here comes the next shift. It's like, what's that 6 in the middle of, Charles Schwab's in there, the big boss. And that's how many pourings of steel we made last night. Well, you can imagine that next shift now knew what the idea was. Like, they better get 7 pourings, right? And of course that was what happened. And the next shift came on. What's that? Oh, and then they came to understand what the main thing was to pour steel, right? And within a month, that was the number 1 producing steel plant in Andrew Carnegie's, right? It wasn't the people, it wasn't the facilities, it was a matter of everybody understanding and being competitive, right?
Yep.
Like
we have that competitive nature.
We're going to beat that. And so in the car business for years and years and years, we always had boards that show who was the leader, who had the most cars out, who had the most gross profit, all those things are just boards. And they do the same thing in the church. I don't know if I completely agree with it, but nonetheless they do. Like, how many baptisms did you get last year? How many members? There's things that do things like that. Understanding here's where the fruit is, what that might look like, and how are we doing, or how do we measure up, so to speak. Has to
analytics.
Do with analytics. There you go. And websites and all that stuff to use that competitive idea, but that only goes so far, right? Because if you don't give people the tools, really to help them with what really is fruitful, then,
Well, Bob, Robbie and Bob, I'm gonna share something, because I go back a few years, and I think what we're talking about just made me sit here just now. I just realized somebody else I should mention. Jesus Labor of Love concept of that, Robbie felt God had laid that on his heart to start that ministry for widowed mothers and that needed help with cars and stuff. And early on, I think when it was in the infant stage, Robbie wanted to meet with me and Bob for lunch one day, and this is down at the little restaurant, I think at Gumtree and 109, if I'm not wrong. But we go in there, and I don't know, I may be speaking out of turn, but I'm going to tell you what I felt. Robbie laid out the plan of what God had put on his heart as far as a ministry to help single moms with automobiles, transportation, repairs, or trying to get them if they get donated. But it was just a concept at that time. But when Robbie was explaining it to me and Bob, one thing that was obvious, and that was his passion for it, his faith that he had that God had put that in front of him, that it would work. As I'm sitting there, I'm trying to think how it was going to work. But I believe in Robbie. I believe in his vision. I believe that God put it on his heart, and I believe in his passion for it. And also I believe that Robbie wouldn't be beat down by other people criticizing, saying it couldn't be done. So I walked out of there, and I may have even told Bob, that's one of the craziest ideas I've ever heard. I don't see how in the world that's going to work, but I'm in. And that was why I was in, is because of your passion and your faith and your willing to share, convey that, what God had put on your heart. And that may have just been me, but I was scratching my head. And as
I was all in right from the beginning.
Yeah.
I had to do a little head scratching and soul searching and everything. But like I say, when you come across with the idea, there was no doubt. There was no, you were in wholehearted. You was going to do it with or without us. You'd appreciate the help, but it was your commitment.
I appreciate the help.
Your commitment to that was so obvious that day, and it made it easier. I didn't grasp it right that second, but you gave me a rock to stand on, and it's done very well.
Yeah, we've had by far and away our biggest year. I think financially we've had more donations than we've ever had. I know we've had more cars donated. We've given away more cars. We've given away more money. It's good that it comes in, it goes out. And a big part of that is Danny Spainhire, with your church. They donated 2 of the cars, and they have us in their budget now, and we get stuff from them every month. But it's amazing. And then we added the hurricane relief. But when you think back to that whole time, which, believe it or not, guys, I mean, I'm thinking this was 2010.
Woo!
Seems like yesterday.
Yeah. So it was like 14 years ago. It was a while.
Yeah.
And
wow.
Yeah, wow. And we hadn't done it long when that lady came in with the air conditioning problem.
Yeah.
And as long as I live, I will never forget that. Tell that story, Jerry.
Yeah, because sometimes when we first were getting off the ground and stuff, there wasn't that many facilities and stuff that were volunteering their time and stuff. So I was just locally trying to at least fill a gap, and it may be stuff I wasn't even, or didn't even have the people that were in our line of business, but I know a little bit about cars. And so I had this woman, and she had contacted Robbie, and her husband had passed away, and it was the middle of summer. I think it was one of those days it was 100 degrees. And she was talking about her air conditioner didn't work in her car, hadn't worked for over a year, and just the heat was more than she could stand, and she wasn't a young lady. Well, she comes in and pulls in and tells me, says, I've talked to Robbie Dillmore and Jesus Labor of Love, and I'm the woman that has the air conditioning problem. So I go out there and I sit in the car, and I said, let's just turn it on and see what we have here. And she's talking about, see how it just blows out hot air. And we're sitting there, and I'm thinking, wait a second here. And I mash this button that has a snowflake on it. Boom, instantly cool air. And she says, how'd you fix that? I said, that little button right there, if you'll mash that thing, you'll have air.
Be thou healed, brother.
Well, the genius of what God did with that for me was that, man, I'll explain that when we come back, but we need your stories. When did God lead you?
You're listening to the Truth Network and truthnetwork.com.
Like a lion we roar. We're in it together, join hand in hand. United we stand. It's moments like this, with our backs to the wall, that we're strongest of all, strongest of all, strongest of all.
I love that last line in that song where it says, it's moments like this when our backs are against the wall. Like you talked about when the fire happened or other things happen in our business, right? That we become united. And I'll never forget one of the first interviews I ever did on Truth Talk years ago. This is probably 2008 or something like that. I was interviewing these people that were Christians in Lebanon, and they had been involved in the war that had happened like in 2002 or 4. It wasn't the current one at all. And he said, it was funny, Robbie, where we were in Lebanon, it was completely denominational. In other words, they had the Catholics over there and the Church of Christ over here, and the Baptists were over there, and the Presbyterians and the Congregationalists, and they were all denominations all over the place. He said, but the moment that the invasion came, and whatever it was, Sharia law or whatever the people were that were running up, the streets, killing people, then all of a sudden denominations went out the window, and the Catholic Church was the strongest built and the most of a fortress, and so we were all in the Catholic Church and loving it, right? That all of a sudden,
it was cool to be Catholic.
All of a sudden, it was just a matter of these people believe in Jesus versus Allah, and all of a sudden, they united them. And trying to find ways that they could come together, and as they did, they've never been stronger, right? And they survived it because they came together, right? And it really is an idea that God says love one another, and even to the point to the Arabs. I mean, everybody's involved in that to some extent. If we could get on the same page and obviously help them to see that the only way they can have forgiveness is through Christ. The only way that they can achieve true love is through Christ. In other words, all those things come together in Christ, and he is the ultimate uniter. However, you can't treat them like they're an enemy and expect them to fall in love with you.
We're supposed to we're supposed to be so much like Jesus in that aspect. What did Jesus do? Jesus showed compassion and love for everybody. Did he call out sin? Absolutely. Did he say when it was sin? Absolutely. But did he do it in a compassionate way to bring people to that fellowship? Absolutely. What are we called to do? The same thing. I mean,
right. Right. And so, to get back to the Jesus, labor, love thing. And again, if you have some wisdom on this idea, we definitely want to hear from you. 866-348-7884, 866-34-TRUTH. We were talking about the Jesus, labor, love, and how God, gave us that vision, actually. And Jerry was telling the story about the lady who was suffering through 2 summers. She said this was her second summer not to have air conditioning because, unfortunately, her husband had died. And for so many widows, without their husband in the house, they don't know a lot about their car. And so the Jesus, labor, love was helpful for them. Single moms in the same boat, especially single moms, in a lot of their cases, they're not getting the help that they need in support from their father, the father of the children, and they're in desperate shape. And as James put it, true in religion is this, single moms, well, actually he said widows and orphans, but same kind of thing. And often it's just a matter of not a financial thing. That didn't cost us anything. It cost Jerry, 20 minutes of his time and that kind of thing. But the blessing you got from it lasts a lifetime, right?
Absolutely. And I think when we look for opportunity, it's always there. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I have a single mom come up who can't figure out how to get the baby seat fastened into the seat. It's something simple like that. And, it's just...
Don't call that simple.
Well, true. That's true.
It took me a little while the first round to round or two, but now it's pretty.
Once you kind of learn the
Yeah, oh, yeah.
learn the tricks of the trade of how to get that thing.
But I was wanting it so securer than one had ever been, and it took me a minute to get it tweaked, but that was different.
Yeah. So the wisdom that we're talking about clearly, is Jesus was telling us that if we can get on the same page, and united we stand, divided we fall, and that's the case in our country, that's the case in our churches. I hate to say it, but if you go into most churches, there's people on one side of the aisle and there's people on the other side of the aisle, and the people don't cross that aisle, and that is not what God had in mind. We got Will is in Ohio, so Will, you're on the Christian Car Guy Show. Good morning.
Good morning, sir. How are you doing today, Robbie?
I couldn't be more excited to hear what you have for us, Will.
Okay, so it will be personal, and so hopefully, people are open to hearing different types of situations to gain a better understanding about unity, because that's what helps me and that's what's helping me.
Good.
So I think, the question was asked, who has or what brings the most unity? And I'll tell you, Robbie, from living the life I've lived, I can at least answer something easier, which is I've been somebody who has brought a great deal of disunity. But then why did I do that? Because I had a bunch of people around me also bringing disunity, close family, relatives. So it was very dysfunctional. I did see bits and pieces within men and women, whether they were in family, in my neighborhood, in the community, that did right, and I could observe and learn. But I thought, why was I so bringing so much disunity? Because I've been taught disunity. So then living an entire life that was, littered with problems and issues, we can go into that another day. What brings unity? Well, when I found Christ, I realized the only person that I need to compare myself to was him, right? So then that resolved some of my character. But what about the he or she, whether it was my brother or my sister, my mother or my father, my stepdad, my cousin, my aunt, my uncle, you name the he or she that I would need to have unity with, because God says to love him first and then have unity with them. And he presents you to his son, Jesus, to see how to love. So we only got to think about, well, how does Jesus love? Well, he walked amongst many people, cursed them not, and it never says who all these people were except for that they were brothers and sisters. So to bring them all together is to realize that every woman and every girl and every man and every boy that we come into contact with is our brother and sister. So I'm going to tell you a short story about my sister. I was growing up so disunified. My sister decided she was going to prostitute herself. And I don't know what was worse, that she was going to do that or that I was accepting that she could do that. And so I tagged along and allowed her to do that. So I thought, well, was it disunity for her to do what she was doing in sight of what God says he came as Jesus to sacrifice himself for, which was for the prostitute and for the beggars and, the poor and the sick and the needy. Give them a name. So that's what I did. I allowed her to do that. She did that. I allowed her to do that. And I could really hark myself on how I've caused that kind of disunity, not just in a tight family, but how others also do it with their sisters and daughters and mothers around here. And it's like, I could feel shame, or I could look at Jesus and say, you know what, you sacrificed yourself for all of that, for all that shame and guilt of disunity I brought. How can I bring more unity? And by paralleling with his character, who he said he was, I bring more unity to my she and he, brother and sister, father and mother, grandfather, granddaughter, daughter, son, boy, girl.
I hate we're at the end of the show, Will, because that's some wisdom right there, buddy. And I am just honored that you would call in and share that. But we all got to know. I know everybody's listening. Is your sister better?
I hope so. We haven't had much communication. That if somebody would be able to reach out to her, name's Willadine, interesting name. But if she were better, I would like to talk to her, and then we could talk about how she could get better if she wasn't.
Well, let's pray for Willadine right this second. Lord, I thank you for Will. I thank you for Willadine. And I pray for her, Lord, that she would find what Will found in you, and that this would help turn her life back towards you. And I thank you again for Will's call. I thank you for this show, and I thank you for what you're doing in Will's life. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Thank you, Will. I'm so grateful.
This is the Truth Network.